Kebawah Duli Paduka Baginda Tengku Ampuan Pahang. Ampun Tuanku. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I've agreed today to deliver a paper on Tanah Air. And I've crafted the title as Tanah Air, the quintessence and soul of the Malay archipelago. I've always used the word quintessence and soul with regard to our presence in this region or in this rantau. Can you flash the map? And when I say quintessence, I mean it's not just the indigeneity or endogeneity of those who are domiciled in this Malay archipelago, but those who consume the geography, the history, those who consume the spirit of the archipelago. So when you talk about this Malay archipelago, I would like to use the word Tanah Air. And Tanah Air has many connotations and can be related to in many forms. So in my delivery this morning, I'll weave through the Tanah Air with a normative and a descriptive tenor. In other words, when we talk about Tanah Air, it's not just the epistemological construct, but also the vision that has been projected, articulated discourse over the centuries with regard to what we mean by Tanah Air. So there are 3 points that I want to say today. One is the name Tanah Air and its various articulations. 2 are the ingredients that make up. When Tuanku was mentioning about food, so I was thinking about ingredients. So the ingredients that make up the Tanah Air in the manner that it expresses a sociological, historical, and cultural reality. It is not just a nebulous, amorphous notion. Because the Tanah Air is much sidelined in the discourse and in the narrative. Similar to the sidelining of the Malay archipelago in the maritime trade route, in the maritime silk route. When they talk about maritime silk route, they talk about China, they talk about India, and they talk about what we call West Asia or the Mediterranean. But the Malay archipelago, this part of the world, has been sidelined. So again, this is part of the, claiming back the narrative. And this is fashionable. In fact, this is what has been done over the last 2 decades, or for several reasons. And the third point is on what we have done, contributed not much by ISTAC in terms of promoting the idea of a Malay dimension to Islamic studies and civilization through Tanah Air. If you look at this map, before that, before I go to the all 3 points, this map represents the Malay world in various ways. Dunia Melayu, Alam Melayu, Tanah Air. But before we consume this map, I want us to compare. When you talk about the Malay world, when you talk about Alam Melayu, there are other alams, other benuas, other continents, other worlds. And the Malay world is not just a notion that is being conscious now. The alam, one of the earliest times when the word Alam Melayu was evoked was in the 1920s and 1930s. in SITC, Sultan Idris Training College, by Abdul Hadi Hassan and Zaaba and Buyong Adil, who wrote about the history of Malaysia. Abdul Hadi Hassan wrote a 5-volume work on Sejarah Alam Melayu. Of course, he gathered that from some colonial discourses, but whatever it is, he gave a sense of a collective unity. What we're talking about here is also a sense of collective unity of the rantau, or where we're staying, and the identity of this rantau. So, Abdul Hadi Hassan, Cikgu Abdul Hadi Hassan, I think some of us would know, developed that. And later it was revived. A new consciousness of the Alam Melayu was revived during the time of Professor Ismail Hussein in the 80s. Dunia Melayu and Alam Melayu. And this is taken up by several Malay NGOs. But when we talk about this Alam or Dunia Melayu, we have also to be cognizant of other Alams or other Dunias. Because there have been many detractors, many forces that have attempted to deconstruct, to say that the Malay has no Alam, the Malay has no Dunia, the Malay has no core, no identity, no culture. And this discourse, which began perhaps about 20, 25 years ago, initially as an academic discourse and then later moved into popular discourse, has influenced Malaysia and the world, saying that the Malay has no civilization and that Malay civilization comes from India. Malay civilization comes from China. Only the weaving. Yeah. That is why one of the terms which are problematic to me is the term Nusantara. Nusantara means literally pulau-pulau di antara dua benua. Nusa antara. Nusa, pulau, antara dua benua. Dua tamadun, China dan India. This connotes a position whereby the peoples, plural, in this part of the world are not capable of evolution and development because they are remnants of the two great civilizations. So one of the things which later I will tell you what we are doing in ISTAC is to redefine this. So now, coming back to the worlds, so far this is the best map that I've seen. This map conjures not so much of physical geography, but tells us about history, tells us about language and linguistics and society. It projects an Austronesian world or a Malay-Polynesian world. But what's important here is this world is among many worlds that exist in this world, in this global system. We have the European world, for example. Okay? Nobody bothers and nobody talks about, nobody problematizes the European world. The European world stretches from Russia to Ireland or to Iceland. That's the European world. And the European world is varied. The British do not know the Dutch. The Italians can't understand the Germans, for example. The Greeks don't understand the Russians. That's the European world. And we will talk about Russia. Russia sometimes refuses to be part of the European world. Nevertheless, it is a collective unity. And in recent years, we find almost daily in the media, since the Ukraine war, the European community has been projecting the identity of being European, the Europeanness of the entity of the peninsula of Asia. In other words, there is a European world, legitimate European world, sociologically, historically, geographically. And then there is the Turkic world. The Turkic world from Anatolia to eastern Turkestan, from Kazakhstan to Uzbekistan. That's the Turkic world. In other words, when we talk about the Turkic world, yeah, they speak a language within one family, but there are differences. those from Anatolia, from Turkey, may not understand so much of those people in Uzbekistan because they only know about 50 or 60%. But nevertheless, the common denominator is the Turkic language, and they can communicate compared to the British, compared to the Europeans. The French cannot communicate with the Russians because they don't know Russian, but those from Turkey can communicate with the Kazakh, although there's some 50% difference. Then there's the Arab world. The Arab world makes up about 22 or 23 nation states, plus minus, you will consider Palestine, right? And the Arab from Hadramaut, my dean is here, he's from Algeria, they may not understand the Algerian or the Moroccan. The tenor and the rendition of the language will be different. It's the same language. They are the Arabs, exactly. So similar with the Malay world. When you talk about the Malay world, people will say, yeah, the Javanese are not Malays. Of course, Javanese will refuse to be part of the Malay world. Similarly, the Russians will refuse to be part of the European world, but they're Europeans. So here, when we talk about the Malay world, we're talking about a collective unity. We're talking about people from the Philippines, the Filipinos, the Javanese, the Minangkabaus, and whoever are part of that Malay world. And also, what about the other two oceans, the Indian and the Pacific Oceans? Are they Malays? Well, there are various names. Yeah? There is the name of Alam Melayu, Dunia Melayu, Nusantara, as I've said, Dunia Berbahasa Melayu, the Austronesian world, the Malay-Polynesian world. And they vary in terms of what they speak, but they speak a common, within a common linguistic family, the Austronesian linguistic family or the Malay-Polynesian linguistic family. So this is the unity that we have of this. And over the centuries, we also have, for example, the word Malaysia. No, I'm not talking about Malaysia as a nation state. I'm talking about Malaysia as a rantau. Malaysia, as many of you would know by now, okay, because this is a recent discourse over the last 20 years or so, popular discourse. Malaysia was used and present in European maps, French maps, especially Malaisie, 17th century Malaisie. And I found a British map, 1865, in London, that has the word Malaysia straddling from Sumatra to the Philippines, Malaysia. And this is quite a rare map. And what does Malaysia mean? Malaysia means islands of the Malays. So that was the Malaysia that was understood by the Europeans, and this is the Malaysia that has been crafted as a nation state. So it means islands of the Malays. And every citizen of Malaysia should know this. Now, over the years, many personalities that we know of, that we have heard of, have advocated this unity of vision, this collective identity, perhaps over the last 200 years. One of which is Jose Rizal, the Malay hero. He himself described himself as a Malay. So he projected this vision of the Malay nation in the 1870s, 1880s. And then we have all these are disciples of Rizal, Winchester Vinsons and Macapagal and so on. They advocated for a Malay nation. And then we have, in Malaya, we have Ibrahim Yaakob from Temerloh, who wrote the book Tanah Air, who wrote this vision of the character of the Tanah Air and how the Tanah Air must be defended against the British and against foreign capital. We also have, we must not forget, Tun Ghazali Shafi'i. We normally forget that he is one of the architects of the name Malaysia. the name Malaysia, see, he was inspired. I suppose he was inspired by the earlier name Malaysia by the French, but he was also inspired by the name Malaysia in terms of the confederation or the federation of law in the British Isles. He was reading Welsh law, Aberystwyth, and he was looking at Wales, Ireland, Scotland as different entities. So he transferred that entity to what we have now in the Malay Archipelago, including Brunei and Singapore. So he called it Malaysia. So Ghazali Shafi'i is another visionary at the same level as those that I've mentioned. And we also have Abu Yamin in Indonesia. And we also must not forget Sukarno, another visionary who, although he did not mention Malaysia, but his Indonesia Raya, similar to Ibrahim Yaakob, resonates the Tanah Air. So the Tanah Air is in the spirit and the soul of the people domiciled in this archipelago. Okay? By the way, I just came back from Riau, the Riau archipelago, and I consume Riau exhaustively, sailing a few hours every day between islands, hundreds of islands. Now, how do we structure the Malay world? There are about 4 ingredients in terms of understanding and consuming this reality, the sociological, cultural, linguistic, historical reality. Back to the map. Retain the map. Not this one. This is the last one. Yeah, okay. One is the ingredient of spatiality, spatial dimension. The spatial dimension refers to the geographical dimension. Right? Tanah Air is geography. Tanah Air is not the separation of Tanah and Air, but the fusion of Tanah and Air. Why we are talking about it now is because Tanah and Air telah dipisahkan. Historically, literally, and politically by the 1824 treaty and subsequently. So Tanah dan Air telah dipisahkan by the Europeans who fought their wars outside of Europe, making the Malay archipelago as the theater of war. Dutch, British, French, the Danish, all were here. The Portuguese were here. So again, because of that, we were broken up. Okay, doesn't matter. That's why I said it's normative and descriptive. Okay? I'm describing, and also I'm providing, or we're providing what things should be. But of course, we have to be contented with what is contested. Right? In other words, if people ask me, where am I a citizen from? I said, yeah, I'm a Malaysian citizen. At the same time, I'm a citizen of the Malay archipelago. I'm a citizen of the Malay world. And this is where ASEAN is important in terms of the duality of citizenship conceptually. Now, how do we structure this? Okay, one is the spatial dimension. The other is the temporal dimension. Temporal dimension would be the historical antecedents that has forged this map that you see, the space that you see here. Third is the social linguistic dimension, which is this map illustrates the social linguistic dimension, the Austronesian languages. And the fourth dimension is the epistemological dimension. Now, if you look at this, there is a certain evolution, a centrifugal revolution. The smallest concentric circle, from this map would be the core Malay nations. The core Malay nations would be Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei. And these core Malay nations are the core Islamic Malay nations. Okay? Negara Melayu Indo. Okay? Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. This is the smallest concentric circle where Islam and the Malays are the majority. The second concentric circle, or do we have a pointer here? Okay. Okay, no pointer. Okay, no problem. The second concentric circle would comprise Malay minorities or minorities who speak Malay. Okay? And these would be in what we call South Thailand, but I wouldn't call South Thailand. Geopolitically, I would call North Peninsula. Okay? North Peninsula, not South Thailand. South Thailand is conforming to Thai geopolitics. Malay minority in Myanmar and the TANAH Basin and in what we call Southern Philippines. And this Malay minority can be Muslim or can be non-Muslim. If you know, in the east coast of, or in this eastern part of the archipelago, east of Sulawesi, in Amboina and so on, Masuk Melayu means Masuk Christian. So again, you see the variation. Okay? Here, Masuk Melayu means Masuk Islam. But over there, Masuk Melayu means Masuk Christian. So again, we see a world of the reality of society, and much of the text in Malay written in those parts, the eastern part of the archipelago, were written in the context of Christianity, in Bahasa Melayu. So again, Malays here must know, okay, this is another world of the Malays, the second concentric circle. The third concentric circle would be inclusive of the Chams, Orang Champa, Orang Cham. Champa too is the geography, the kingdom. Orang Cham. Early on in the Annam Highlands in Vietnam, and later they were pushed down to Cambodia, Kampong Chom, and so on, and then they came to the Malay archipelago. In history, you find a lot of Cham people, I think Dr. Halimi would know, Nakhodas, they were merchants and they were sailing to Aceh. So these Chams are also part of the Malay world, and the Chams have a concept of Tanah Air. Okay? Now, if you look into the narrative, you may think that, or we may think that only the Malays in here would have this idea of Tanah Air. But the Chams also have the idea of Tanah Air, but they are not narrated as Chams, they are narrated as Vietnamese. So this, again, a misrepresentation of because why Tanah Air? If we look at Vietnam now, the Parrot's Beak, that face, or that faces what we call now the South China Sea. But at one time, it was Laut Champa, okay? I think until the 17th century, Laut Champa, because the Chams were facing the sea and they had this concept of the water catchment area and rivers, lakes, streams, the sea and the oceans. And their idea of the ocean faced what we call the Philippines and what we call the South China Sea. The next concentric circle are the Malays, or some people will say Austronesians in Taiwan. The Aborigines of Taiwan, about maybe 400,000, they are part of the Malay Austronesian world. Okay? And that's the fourth concentric circle. And the fifth concentric circle would be the Malay Polynesian world. From Madagascar, right up to Rapa Nui, Easter Islands, Hawaii, and New Zealand. So when we talk about the Malay world, these are the extent of the Malay world. They are diverse, but they are part of a collectivity. There were contexts between Sultan Abu Bakar and the King of Hawaii in the 1800s. Yes. And they celebrated their brotherhood as part of the Malay world. And again, if you go to New Zealand, the Maoris are brothers. I'm not talking about DNA. Okay? DNAs vary. Okay? If you look at Maori DNA, there are many, a large percentage will be Caucasian DNA. You know? So we're not talking about DNA here, but we're talking about language and culture. You go to other worlds, for example, you go to the Arab world or you go to the Persianate world or the Turkic world, the Turks, for example, have many DNAs. They have DNAs from Eastern Europe, they have Caucasian DNA, they have Mongol DNA, but they all consume themselves as Turks and speaking a Turkic language. So similarly with the Malay world. So this is the Malay world that we're talking about. And this is very much maritime. In terms of, 90% of the benua Melayu is water, tanah air. Hence, how do we redefine civilization? Over the years, people have attacked me for promoting Malay civilization. They said there's no Malay civilization. But I said, yes, if we measure civilization against the continental history, if we use a continental definition of civilization, landlocked, land-based definition, we cannot find the Malay. So if we want to find the Malay, if we want to find the soul and quintessence of the Malay, then we have to look at another definition of civilization, which is maritime. I'm also inspired by two other thoughts. One is Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun, in his one of his writings, inferred that the reservoir of Arab civilization is the desert. He didn't say Islamic civilization, he said Arab civilization. The reservoir of Arab civilization is the desert. And the desert, implying the environment, physical environment, geographical environment, climatic environment are important in shaping human behavior. So what shapes Malay behavior and Malay attitudes? The Malay adat, the Malay budi, the Malay finesse, the Malay cultural artifacts. It is the seas. So, to define Malay civilization, one has to look into the maritime world. The only people in the world that consumes and engages with the lakes, the seas, and the oceans. So if you want to understand the Malay, you want to understand the soul of the Malay, the budi of the Malay, we have to look at the seas. And this brings to my sojourn in the part of the Malay archipelago. I've been traversing the Malay archipelago by various ways, but also by sea across the Straits of Malacca, from Pariksen to Dumai to Rupat, 2 or 3 hours on the sea. But this time around, I went to the heartland of the Malays. Not the Minangkabaus, not the other ethnic Malays, but Riau. I went to 2 sites, and I wanted to go there for a long time. It took me 20 years to reach the place, to reach Pulau Bintan and Pulau Penyengat and Pulau di Gunung Daik, Pulau Lingga. Okay? So I went to Pulau Penyengat, which is about 6 kilometers from Tanjung Pinang. Pulau Penyengat, anybody who wants to study modern Malay civilization, modern Malay society, Malay modernity would have to go to Pulau Penyengat, compulsory. Because from Pulau Penyengat, this is in the 1880s, 1890s, from Pulau Penyengat, the Malay culture of writing, printing, the Malay articulation of criticism, the participation of royalty. I found out that, in Pulau Penyengat at the time, they established a club, Rushdeh Club. It's a club of literatis, those who write, those who comment, those who write essays. Before we write in Syair and Pantun and Gurindam. Okay? But in Pulau Penyengat, they write prose. And only women who are married with royalty can write, can be part of that Rushdeh Club. But what happened is that the Sultan brought 2 printing presses. One for the intellectuals or members of the Rushdeh Club, the other is for the royalty, for the palace. But before Rushdeh Club, there is another site in Pulau Lingga rumah cap kerajaan. So this was in the 1870s. In other words, there was already a print culture, but for official purposes. But the Rujdah Club became that reservoir for interaction, intellectual exchanges, and so on. And they produced many books, which Tuan could mention. That culture was transferred to Singapore. Singapore was nothing without Pulau Penyengat. Singapore would not be civilized as it is. Singapore would not be the hub of Malay intellectual life without Pulau Penyengat. Because Pulau Penyengat provided the tradition of printing. It went to Singapore. Syed Al-Hadi was educated in Pulau Penyengat. He was the anak angkat Sultan. And without Pulau Penyengat, there won't be Syed Al-Hadi. And without Syed Al-Hadi, there won't be Al-Imam. So that periodical of Malay criticism and so-called, the British call it radicalism. And from Singapore, that hub of Malay intellectuality moved to various parts of the Malaya until Pulau Pinang. And in Pulau Pinang, Syed Al-Hadi established the Jelutong Press, which lasted about 20 plus years. So in other words, here, you see we see the modern Malay culture, modern Malay intellectual culture, Malay intellectual history, modern Malay intellectual history began in Pulau Penyengat. So that is one. Second is Gunung Daik. I wanted to see Gunung Daik. I know Gunung Daik Pejabat 3, but I wanted to see. So I went there. Yeah, this is the photo. 3 cabang, 1, 2. On the left side is the cabang which has eroded actually. And in Lingga, many there asked they can recite Pantun Budi. So the quintessence of Budi is resonates the geography. And Pulau Pandan is between Pulau Lingga and Pulau Singkep, south of it. It's in between. It's far away. It's a small island. So that Budi, that Pantun Budi, would have originated there, the genesis of the Malay Budi. So this is where I think this, it was a maritime environment when I was sailing for a total of maybe 11, 12 hours. I was surrounded by hundreds of islands, literally hundreds of islands, and it was a protected environment. And I fear, I have this phobia of water, of the sea, actually. But the sea was calm, it was a very protected environment, and from from Sungai Tenum, in Lingga, we sail up and down to Dai and to Tanjung Pinang and to Batam finally. These islands protect. So I would assume that this is the environment create the consciousness and the worldview of the Malays. Okay? So this is again the essence of Tanah Air. Now the third part is on what ISTAC has done. Little contribution is we have convened since 2021 a series of lectures, Malay Maritime Civilization lectures. We have had about 16 lectures, and we got back 12 chapters, and we're publishing those as part of the a book on Malay Maritime Civilization. But when I was doing the project, I suggested to ISTAC there are 2 more objectives. Second objective is to create a Malay Maritime Encyclopedia. I know that in Indonesia we have there are a number of scholars. I know 3 of them are part of this project, and they're very active in looking at the Indonesia. But I'm not satisfied with that, because when you talk about Indonesia and Nusantara, that's part of the Malay archipelago. That's not the whole thing. That's only the Javanese view of the Malay world, not the Malay view, not our view. Okay? I know Indonesians may not like this. But yeah, an encyclopedia published in Malaysia. We hope that we can, later on we'll identify people and we'll organize a team. It's a long-term project, perhaps maybe 3-4 years. And then the third objective, I told Dato' Farid, is to get those who have money and authority to construct ocean-going ships to sail from the archipelago to around the world using traditional Malay technology. Okay? Indonesia have done that with Samudra Raksa, I think about 20 years back, when they sailed from Java to, but they didn't make it back to Madagascar. But I would assume that if we're talking about the greatness of Malay navigation skills, the greatness of the prowess of the Malays, and the Malays would see the stars and be able to sail. And when I asked the Maoris, for example, what happened? Did you drift to New Zealand from South Asia, Sundaland? No. We know the stars. We know the waters. So again, I want these to be embodied, physically embodied. So I hope that, this is an announcement, public announcement, so I hope there'll be takers on it. And we prove to the world that we can do it. So basically that's my rendition of the Tanah Air. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.